April 1942. In the still waters of Japan's inland sea, the battleship Yamato rests at anchor, massive and silent, the largest warship ever built, a floating symbol of imperial confidence. Deep inside her steel hull, far from the cheering crowds and propaganda posters, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto studies a stack of papers that refuse to settle his mind. These pages outline Operation MI, the coming attack on Midway, and though the plan is praised as brilliant by nearly everyone who reads it, Yamamoto feels something tightening in his chest that no tactical diagram can explain. Yamamoto is not an alarmist. He is not prone to fear. He is a professional who has spent more than 3 decades at sea, who understands naval warfare not as ideology, but as arithmetic. Ships, fuel, pilots, distances, replacement rates. Numbers do not care about honor. They do not respond to courage. They simply add up, or they do not. And the numbers in front of him are wrong. The plan sprawls across the Pacific like a spiderweb, a diversionary attack in the Aleutians, multiple carrier groups approaching from different directions, battleships held far to the rear, an invasion force timed to arrive just after Midway is neutralized. It assumes perfect coordination across thousands of miles of ocean, flawless communications, and an enemy that behaves exactly as predicted. Yamamoto knows how wars actually unfold. He knows friction. He knows chance. He knows that the ocean does not forgive complexity. Most troubling of all, the plan rests on a belief Yamamoto has never shared, that the United States is exhausted, that Pearl Harbor broke American morale, that America lacks the will for a prolonged, grinding war, that Japanese spirit can compensate for material inferiority. Yamamoto knows this is a lie because he has seen the truth with his own eyes. Years earlier, he walked the streets of American cities. He studied at Harvard. He rode trains that crossed entire states without leaving industrial sprawl. He visited oil fields that stretched beyond the horizon. He watched shipyards where hulls were assembled with assembly line precision. He watched a society that did not glorify war, it industrialized it. Yamamoto had warned them. Before Pearl Harbor, he spoke plainly to the high command. Japan could strike first. Japan could win early victories. Japan could dominate for 6 months, maybe a year. After that, the balance would turn inexorably. American factories would awaken. Production would scale. Losses would be replaced faster than Japan could inflict them. He told them there would be no dramatic collapse, no sudden surrender, only pressure, relentless industrial pressure. They dismissed him as overly cautious, too Western in his thinking, not spiritual enough. Pearl Harbor seemed to prove them right. So did the early victories across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Each success buried Yamamoto's warnings deeper beneath confidence and ideology. Now, as he reads Operation MI, he realizes the gamble has grown desperate. Midway is not just another battle. It is an attempt to force a decision before America's strength fully comes online. It is an admission, whether acknowledged or not, that time is Japan's enemy. And Yamamoto knows something else. If this fails, there will be no second chance. He raises concerns during planning meetings, quietly at first. He questions the dispersal of forces, the distance between his battleships and the carriers, the reliance on radio silence combined with precise timing, the assumption that American carriers remain at Pearl Harbor. He asks about code security. What if American cryptanalysts have broken JN-25? What if they know where we are going? What if Midway is not surprised? The room stiffens. Rear Admiral Ugaki assures him the codes are secure. Yamamoto presses again, carefully, respectfully. He reminds them the Americans are not amateurs, that they have universities, mathematicians, and resources Japan cannot match. The response is polite, firm, and dismissive. American morale is shattered, they say, their fleet crippled, their commanders timid. They will react slowly, predictably. Yamamoto does not argue further. He knows the rules of the institution he serves. Persistence becomes insubordination. Insistence becomes disloyalty. So he stops. And that silence will cost Japan everything. When the order finally comes to prepare the fleet, Yamamoto signs it. The emperor has been briefed. Imperial General Headquarters has approved the plan. The machinery is already moving. To halt it now would be unthinkable. The fleet begins to assemble. Carriers load aircraft. Pilots train endlessly, unaware they are rehearsing their own extinction. Battleships steam into position. Fuel tanks are filled. Charts are marked. Signals are prepared. And through it all, Yamamoto carries a knowledge he cannot share, that the Americans are not guessing. They are waiting. The result was catastrophic. 2 Japanese carriers were judged hit. One likely sunk, another crippled. Aircraft losses severe. The carefully sequenced operation fractured instantly. Without carrier air cover, the invasion force became exposed. The battleships in the rear were too far away to intervene. The entire plan unraveled in a matter of minutes. Yamamoto felt a chill settle over him. This was not a fantasy scenario. This was exactly what an informed, aggressive enemy would do. It was the most dangerous possibility he had feared from the beginning, now demonstrated in miniature before his eyes. He waited for the room to absorb the implication. Instead, Rear Admiral Akagi spoke. The results, he said, were unrealistic. American commanders lacked the boldness required for such an attack. Their morale had been broken by Pearl Harbor. Their doctrine emphasized caution. They would not risk carriers so recklessly. The decision was made on the spot. The American strike was invalidated. The carriers were restored to operational status. The exercise continued as if nothing had happened. Yamamoto did not protest openly. He asked a single, measured question. What if the Americans behaved differently than expected? What if they attack during recovery operations? Akagi's answer was curt. The scenario was too unlikely to warrant concern. And just like that, the war game ceased to be a test. It became a performance. Yamamoto understood what had happened. The exercise had revealed a fatal vulnerability. Instead of addressing it, leadership had erased it to preserve confidence. The plan was not being refined, it was being protected from reality. This was not merely arrogance, it was institutional blindness. A system that punished doubt and rewarded certainty could not adapt, even when adaptation was urgently required. Yamamoto carried that knowledge with him as the fleet finally sailed. The Kido Butai, 4 fleet carriers, the most powerful striking force Japan had ever assembled, moved east across the Pacific. Radio silence held. Timetables were followed. Every officer did his duty with precision and pride. What none of them knew was that American code breakers at Station Hypo had already pieced together the plan. JN-25 was compromised. The attack on Midway was no secret. Distances, dates, force composition, most of it was known. The Americans were not reacting. They were positioning. Admiral Chester Nimitz had moved his carriers east of Midway, exactly where Japanese planners believed nothing would be. Aircraft were fueled, pilots briefed. Every American commander involved understood the stakes. This would not be a defensive battle. It would be an ambush. As Yamamoto stood on the bridge of the Yamato, far to the rear of the carrier force, he felt the weight of that separation more acutely than ever. His battleships were magnificent, but irrelevant. This war would be decided by aircraft and timing. And if something went wrong, he would be too far away to change it. All he could do was wait and hope. June 4, 1942 begins quietly. Too quietly. Over the Pacific, dawn spreads across a calm sea as Japanese carrier gecks come alive with motion. Engines start, deck crews move with drilled precision. Pilots climb into cockpits, believing they are about to finish what Pearl Harbor began. At 04:30 hours, the first wave launches toward Midway. 108 aircraft rise into the morning sky. Yamamoto receives confirmation aboard the Yamato. The attack is underway. The plan is moving. Initial reports are encouraging. Bomb hits on Midway installations, fires observed. Anti-aircraft fire heavy but manageable. The base is damaged but not neutralized. Commander Nagumo faces a decision that will define the battle. Should he prepare a second strike on Midway or rearm for a potential naval engagement? Then comes the first complication. A scout plane from the cruiser Tone reports enemy ships sighted. The message is vague, no carriers confirmed. Nagumo hesitates. Doctrine demands certainty. He delays. Aircraft returning from Midway begin landing. Deck crews rush to refuel and rearm. Bombs are removed, torpedoes brought up, then reversed. Orders change again. The carriers enter the most dangerous phase of naval aviation. Fuel lines exposed, munitions scattered, flight decks crowded, hangars full. Everything Yamamoto feared is now happening in real time. At 9:18 hours, the message arrives. Enemy carriers confirmed. Nagumo now faces the worst possible scenario. His decks are not ready. His aircraft are not armed for a naval strike. His fighters are low on fuel from continuous patrols, and the Americans are already airborne. The first attackers arrive at low altitude. American torpedo bombers, slow, obsolete, almost defenseless. They charge straight toward the Japanese fleet through walls of anti-aircraft fire. One squadron after another is annihilated. Pilots die in burning aircraft, splashing into the sea without landing a single hit. From the Japanese perspective, it looks like victory. The attacks are repelled. The carriers survive. Fighter pilots cheer. Confidence returns. But something else is happening. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol has been dragged down to sea level. Fighters burn fuel. Ammunition runs low. Formation discipline breaks as pilots chase individual targets. And above them, unseen, American dive bombers are arriving. At 10:20 hours, 3 squadrons appear almost simultaneously. They descend from the sun, steep angles, sirens screaming, bombs falling. The Akagi is hit first. One bomb penetrates the flight deck and explodes among fueled aircraft. Fire spreads instantly. Secondary explosions rip through the hangar. Damage control teams are overwhelmed within minutes. The Kaga is struck moments later. Multiple hits. Fires rage out of control. The Soryu follows. Another bomb. Another inferno. In less than 5 minutes, 3 Japanese fleet carriers are mortally wounded. Aboard the Yamato, reports come in fragments, confusion, then clarity. Yamamoto understands immediately. This is not a setback. This is catastrophe. Nagumo launches what aircraft he can. The Hiryu strikes back, damaging the Yorktown. For a brief moment there is hope, but it is fleeting. American scouts find Hiryu. Dive bombers attack again. By evening, she too is burning. 4 carriers gone. The core of Japan's naval air power is destroyed in a single day. The silence aboard the Yamato is absolute. Officers stare at maps that no longer matter. Years of training, thousands of experienced aviators, the elite of Japan's Navy, gone. Yamamoto issues the withdrawal order. The invasion of Midway is canceled. The fleet turns west. The battle is over. But the war has changed forever. As the surviving Japanese ships retreat westward, the Pacific grows quiet again. The smoke drifts. Burning carriers sink slowly beneath the waves. And for the first time since Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy is no longer the hunter. Aboard the Yamato, Yamamoto does not celebrate survival. He studies loss reports, aircraft gone, pilots dead, deck crews missing. The human capital he spent decades building has vanished in a single morning. Japan lost over 3,000 men at Midway. More importantly, it lost the men who could not be replaced. Carrier aviation is not machinery. It is experience. It is instinct. It is muscle memory learned over years. And those men are now on the ocean floor. The Americans lost one carrier, one, and that difference is everything. Yamamoto understands what his colleagues do not yet fully grasp. Ships can be built. Pilots cannot be rushed. Training a carrier aviator takes years. Training one well takes even longer. Japan does not have those years. In shipyards across the United States, hulls are already taking shape. Essex-class carriers, faster, larger, built for mass production. The Japanese have no equivalent program. Their carriers are handcrafted masterpieces. The Americans build theirs like automobiles. Numbers begin to speak. In 1942, Japan produces roughly 1,200 aircraft per month. The United States will soon produce more than 8,000. By 1943, American factories are churning out a new aircraft every 5 minutes. Pilots graduate in waves. Losses are absorbed. Lessons are institutionalized. Japan cannot keep up. The psychological shock spreads through the fleet. Midway shatters the myth of invincibility. Officers begin questioning assumptions that once went unchallenged, but the system resists reform. Criticism is still dangerous. Truth is still filtered. Yamamoto returns to planning with a new clarity. Defensive perimeter strategy, attrition avoidance, delay. Time is now the enemy. But time belongs to America. 6 months after Midway, American carriers strike Guadalcanal. Japanese forces fight fiercely, brilliantly, and they lose pilots at a rate that cannot be sustained. Every victory costs more than it yields. Every engagement shrinks Japan's margin. By 1943, the difference is visible in the air. American pilots are less experienced individually, but they operate within a system that forgives mistakes. Japanese pilots must be perfect, and perfection is fragile. Yamamoto knows this war is now unwinnable, but surrender is unthinkable. The only option is to fight on and hope America tires. It will not. On April 18, 1943, Yamamoto boards a bomber to inspect frontline units. His itinerary is transmitted over JN-25, the same code, the same vulnerability, the same blindness. American codebreakers intercept the message. P-38 fighters launch with precision. They meet the bomber exactly where intelligence predicted. Yamamoto is killed in the jungle of Bougainville. The man who understood America best is gone, and with him dies any remaining chance of strategic realism within the Japanese High Command. The war continues for 3 more years, island by island, atoll by atoll. Each battle costs Japan irreplaceable men. Each American loss is replaced in weeks. The math never changes. Midway did not end the war, but it ended Japan's ability to win it. After Yamamoto's death, the Imperial Japanese Navy continues the war without its most clear-eyed strategist. The men who replace him are brave, disciplined, and loyal, but they inherit a situation that can no longer be fixed by courage. The problem is no longer tactics, it is no longer planning, it is no longer leadership, it is arithmetic. Every month, American shipyards launch new carriers. Every month, airfields across the United States graduate thousands of pilots. Fuel flows without interruption. Steel arrives on schedule. Engines are tested, shipped, installed, and replaced as if war were merely another industrial contract. Japan, meanwhile, begins rationing training hours. Pilots fly fewer sorties before combat. Replacement crews are rushed. Aircraft are cannibalized for parts. Maintenance cycles stretch longer. Losses are hidden on paper to preserve morale. By late 1943, Japanese carrier pilots are flying missions they would never have been allowed to attempt in 1941. The margin for error is gone, and error is inevitable. The Americans learn faster. They rotate pilots home to teach new classes. They write manuals. They institutionalize failure so it doesn't repeat. Japan relies on tradition, intuition, and honor, concepts that cannot replace destroyed aircraft. Battle after battle reinforces the same lesson. At the Philippine Sea in 1944, Japanese pilots fly into what Americans will later call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Hundreds of aircraft are destroyed for minimal American loss. The imbalance is no longer subtle, it is overwhelming. Japan still has ships, still has pilots, still has weapons, but it no longer has a future. The war drags on not because victory is possible, but because the system cannot admit defeat. The same institutional blindness that ignored Yamamoto before Midway now ensures the suffering continues long after the outcome is decided. Cities burn, civilians starve. Young pilots are trained for suicide missions because there are no longer enough planes to support conventional operations. And yet, even in this collapse, the core lesson of Midway remains unspoken inside Japan's leadership. They did not lose because their sailors lacked courage. They did not lose because their pilots lacked skill. They did not lose because their ships were inferior. They lost because they misunderstood their enemy. Yamamoto had warned them. He had seen America's factories. He had seen its railways. He had seen its oil fields. He had understood that a nation capable of producing endlessly could afford mistakes and learn from them. Japan could not. Midway was the moment that difference became permanent. Not because of 5 minutes of dive bombers, but because those 5 minutes revealed a truth no propaganda could erase. That wars between industrial powers are not decided by brilliance alone. They are decided by systems, by production, by replacement, by time. Japan gambled everything on a perfect plan executed by perfect men. America bet on the ability to recover from imperfection. Only one of those strategies survives contact with reality. Today, Midway is remembered as a turning point, but for Yamamoto, it was confirmation. Confirmation that the war he feared had arrived. Confirmation that the warnings he voiced had been correct. Confirmation that the empire he served had chosen pride over preparation. And in the end, the Pacific War followed the path he predicted from the beginning. The sleeping giant did not just awaken, it organized. And once it did, there was no stopping it. See you in the next one.